Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Seth.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
We are brothers by trade.
Not by practice.
Not by practice.
We are trade brothers.
We're trade brothers.
Trade Federation.
What if we were Secret Society brothers, but still brothers?
If we were trade brothers, would we bring on an apprentice brother?
We could. We could expand the podcast.
Apprentice brother.
Wasn't that what we do with our guests? What if?
Yeah, they're all
Classic
apprentice
Gaming Brothers isn't necessarily us about our brotherhood, but is about the brotherhood of our cult.
What if it's a union?
Secret Society or union.
Yeah, we're a union.
We're a union, cult, secret society.
Those three things.
We are those three things.
Cult, union, secret society, also known as a cuss.
Oh, a cuss. And the only person who's not a brother is our dear leader, who is Producer Doug, because he leads the brothers.
Yes.
In strife and in turmoil, we trusted Doug.
In sickness and in health, until death do us part.
Hope won't be anytime soon. But the way Producer Doug smokes, he'll live longer than us.
Yeah, he's gonna be preserved by nicotine and ash.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Zach.
Yes, Seth.
What have you recently been playing?
Seth, recently I've been playing Chasm the Rift, developed by Action Forums and published by Mega Media. Chasm the Rift is a FPS released in 1997 for MS-DOS, developed by a team from the Ukraine. I've been playing the updated version that was released on Steam by SNEG Limited, or SNEG, and that was released in 2022. It's a pretty alright FPS. I enjoy myself. I wouldn't put it up there with games like Quake or Doom. You can definitely see where the influence was from games like Quake or Doom, but I wouldn't say it is a Quake killer. Like, I'm not going to play this game over Quake, but I do like it. It's a fast-paced shooter where you, at least the first level, is set in a military base that has a bunch of random enemies going against you, such as creatures that definitely aren't facehuggers, guys with shotguns, and guys that fly and shoot rockets at you. It's pretty tough. Those guys that shoot rockets at you do a ton of damage, but I'm overall enjoying myself. It's definitely dated, a little janky, but it's got a fun jank to it, but I'm glad that at least Sneg has decided to preserve Chasm the Rift so I can get a chance to play it myself. And I'm liking what I'm playing so far. But Chasm the Rift can be found on Steam. I picked up Chasm the Rift when it was on sale, and the sale currently goes until June 12th. The sale puts the game at $4.99, usually retails for $19.99. I don't think it's worth $20. I think it's worth $4.99 maybe. I don't think it's worth $19.99. So definitely pick it up if you're interested, or if this sounds like a game that you're interested in, pick it up while it's on sale. But yeah, it's kind of a very janky but fun first-person shooter from the 90s. Seth, what about you? What have you been playing?
Recently, I've been playing a game that I've been waiting for quite a some time for it to come out, probably about 6 years, give or take. The game that I've been waiting about 6 years for to come out was Paralives. So Paralives is a life simulation game, very similar, akin to The Sims. There's definitely Sims inspirations. However, it was made by people who like the Sims and simulation games, and not made by people who like shareholders and profits. Paralives is just now in early access, which was it was released into early access May 25th of 2026, and it is not like a janky early access game. It is a pretty well fleshed out early access game, and they're truly using early access to take feedback and like get through bugs and like really using it to kind of refine the game. And they're committed to releasing additional content for the game and not going down the DLC route, but they're going to be releasing things such as pets and all that type of stuff over time. It is taking off by storm by all the sim influencers and all that, flipping over to Paralives and doing content on that. One of the major selling points of Paralives is the stretch feature. So if you're familiar with building in The Sims, you can make your house as big as you'd like, but all the furniture kind of is the same size. You could vaguely scale it through uses of cheats, but it just generally makes it so that it's kind of unrealistic. Like you can make the couch super small, but that it's just super small. Like you can make the couch the size of an ant, but that doesn't help your sim. Paralives has an in-native built stretch both upwards and sideways. For most things, we're talking not only furniture, where you could stretch the couch out and you can make it a very long couch. You can, in fact, make the couch the entire length of the building property lot.
As you should.
Super long couch. You could also make a bed the same length.
Can you make beds? You can make beds really long, but not very wide.
Furniture, if it shouldn't stretch one way, it doesn't. Not at least without cheats. So all beds in Paralives are singles that you can stretch to make into queen and kings and stuff like that. And the more you stretch, the more pillows populate on the bed. You cannot get more than 2 people in a bed at the time, no matter how long it is. But if you have a super long couch, you can have super amount of people sit on the couches. So that's one of the main differences as well. But that build tool, that stretch tool, also goes into like building elements such as stairs and windows. Like, so you can take a wall and you can make it really short, so you can have like a foundation, and then you can put another wall on top of it and then make it really long, and you could go up about 24 stories in regards to making your buildings. So you can have pretty tall buildings, and then you can have windows that run the entire length of that 24 stories, and you can in fact make a building that's completely pretty much made of glass if you decide to just use the right window and stretch it. Some of the cool things in the game that they did is that your sim, different jobs become available at different days, right? Some companies just hire different jobs at different days.
Yeah.
And so like you have to check regularly if you're not in the career path that you want to be in for your sim,
right?
As it is in real life. You can, in Paralives, work more than one job, and not multiple part-time jobs. You can work multiple full-time jobs as long as the schedules correspond where you can work both of the jobs at the same time. So it's kind of cool if you wanted to be like a barista and a gym teacher. You can like work nights at the coffee shop and work in the day at the school or what have you. I'm playing a character by the name of Brian with a Y. His last name is Waterdeep because they were both randomly generated names, and I thought it was fun that his name was Waterdeep. And so Brian is he decided to be very like a smart loner guy, and he is a software engineer, and he spends his days working and going home and playing on his computer, learning how to work better, and occasionally calling up his coworkers to chat. And it plays very similar to The Sims. It's an early access game. It is not done by a AAA studio. So like clearly it's not going to be replicating The Sims one for one. The one thing I do really like about it though is you can pick a story. So every game has a storyteller that you select at the beginning, and you can have like a really easy storyteller, or you can have like a storyteller that makes things complicated. And every single night that your character goes to sleep, you can pull a card that ends up impacting your life. So it may be like you get 500 parabucks because of a tax refund, and then you select that and you get the 500 paralives in the morning. One of the things that I learned is that you could pick to get, like, I got a draw where it said you get 2 job performance buffs. So the way the jobs work is you have ranks. The more ranks you have in the job, the more higher you get paid. So it was like 2 ranks up. And I was like, oh, great, I'll take 2 ranks. But thing is, I was now at a higher rank, but my character was not skilled to work at that rank. So then he was going to work and losing, like, his job performance was really bad because he was just essentially promoted into a position that he was not skilled to do. And they're like, wow, you do a really crappy job at this job. Why'd we promote you to this? And he's like, I don't know. I just pulled a card one night. So it's kind of cool in regards to that. So then he had to really dedicate himself to learn technology stuff. There's also like the way that you chat with people is a little different. You kind of have some like different things that you can say, and you build up like a chat meter, and then once the chat meter's full, you can select an action and stuff. So there's a lot of interesting mechanics that they've added in. I don't think I mentioned it, but it is developed and published by the Paralives team, which was and is led by Alex Massey, who is the main developer and lead on the project and game, as it were. I'm very happy to finally see this game in real space and being able to play it. Such a cool game, and it's really nice also to get pressure onto EA. Like, EA is not going to change how they do things because there's nobody else in the market. So now there's a couple of people in the market, and there's a couple of people in the market that are doing a good job at putting pressure on them. So they are going to have to take a serious look at their market share as they start to lose, as these games become better and better.
Now, how does Paralives compare to Inzoi, which I think was another game that you played?
Yes, I think Paralives has the advantage because Inzoid is putting a lot into the way it looks and the like generative AI to be able to come in and really make anything. And so like you can pretty much describe something and it will generate that product, whether it's right or wrong. And it's also very computive heavy because it's graphically very nice looking. It's like high end, it's realistic, like it's trying to go for like photorealism. Paralives is going for like shell shaded cartoon. So like Paralives is drawing a distinction where it's very decidedly a cartoon universe. The characters are all like extra bolded outlined kind of thing, and they just look like humans, but they also look like they're characters in a game where a noise is looking like your character it's trying to go for like realism. So Paralives runs better than a noise, especially on computers that may not have the top of the line hardware.
Cool. I was just curious because I know you played both,
Yeah.
and I know both are trying to be the Sims killer.
Yeah, Paralives is also a little bit more simplistic, and Noise has a lot more options. So like even as you control your character, you can have like 1 trillion different options, and like even conversations. You pick like you go down these conversation trees with the Noise, and you could be like doing all these different things. Paralives, it's like I'm chatting with you. I get 3 different things that I can do in this chat. And I think that simplicity is what's going to really reinforce the coolness of the game. So that's Paralives. Was released back into early access of May of this year, 2026, May 25th. So check it out if you're looking to check out a game that is similar-ish to The Sims. It's a life simulator. I think it comes in at $40, which is not bad. I believe you can probably get it for 10% off through a bundle or something like that. But yeah, it's MSRP, and its price that they're just releasing it at is $39.99, which is also a breath of fresh air. It's nice to have a game that's as deep as Paralives is for the price that it is, especially with the promise of future content coming through.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, today we're talking about a game that does not have future content coming through, or a game series, rather, that does not have future content coming through. That game series is King's Quest. You see, Seth and I talked about in prior episodes doing a episode on quest games when Seth talked about Conquests, the games made by Sierra, and I played Conquests of the Longbow. We said that it's about time that we do a quest games episode, and that's what we started to do. We started working on notes for a whole episode dedicated to quest games, but as I was working on the notes, I realized that there is a lot to talk about with just one of these game series, and there are a few, and that is at least King's Quest. So to kind of level set people before we get into our memories, about 300 episodes ago, Seth and I had Damien on to talk about Sierra Online, and we covered some of the quest games during that conversation. We talked about King's Quest, we briefly covered Space Quest, Police Quest, Quest for Glory, Eco Quest. We didn't talk about Conquest then, but we have since talked about it recently. But it's just so much games, it's so much history. It made sense to kind of make this more centralized on King's Quest, and then do an episode maybe on Police Quest, and then maybe do an episode on Space Quest, and go from there. But to get into our memories, Seth, do you have any memories of any of the King's Quest games or any of the Quest games in general?
Yes. So I have started to try and play most of the Quest games. That Police Quest, King's Quest, Space Quest. But I like to play things in order, so I've started playing the first game of King's Quest, Space Quest, and Police Quest. And those games are obtuse. You can soft lock yourself out of the game in King's Quest. I think you could also soft lock yourself out in Police Quest. I was really interested in playing Police Quest until I realized that you had to do checks outside of your police cruiser every time you left your police cruiser, or else the police cruiser would break, and you had to do them in a very specific order. And the game really didn't give you any clue clues on what the order was. And King's Quest, very similar. There's like certain things that if you don't do in the right order, you can literally get stuck across a bridge that you can't cross. So be that as it may, I tried to play a number of the Quest games. Ultimately, I haven't really just gone and started playing like some of the later Quest games. I do really want to get through like SWAT and later Police Quests and play through some of the later King's Quests, but I just have to get around to it and sit down and play through them. I have played some other Sierra Online games beyond the Quest series. EcoQuest: The Search of Cletus, which is a game that I had Zachary play. I have beaten the entirety of that game. That's a fun game. You play as a child who is trying to clean up the ocean. This is like the overall plot, and you're also searching for Cletus, who's a whale. But that was a fun game, and I do say that they really, those type of games really had some towards like after they got out of the EGA type of graphics and they moved it to like the more dynamic and like fleshed out graphics. I feel like they definitely had like a style that was kind of similar across all of them, and it was like you were playing a Sierra game essentially. And even the EGA versions like had like a similar, like you always knew you were playing a Sierra type game because of the style, as it were.
Right, yeah, makes sense.
What about you? Do you have any memories? No, right?
Well, no. So I've like Seth. I've played a few of the Sierra Quest games in recent years. King's Quest, a little bit of Space Quest, a little bit of Police Quest. But funnily enough, my first exposure to any of the Quest games was through the website HomestarRunner.com, a classic Flash series that used to be pretty popular back when I was younger. And in the games section of Homestar Runner, they had Peasant Quest, which was a parody of the King's Quest games. And in Peasant Quest, just like King's Quest, it was obtuse and you could soft lock yourself, but that was kind of the point. It was a parody. I definitely didn't get the joke because I wasn't familiar with King's Quest, but I did like playing Peasant Quest. And I am familiar with other Sierra Online games, especially games made in the same engine as the King's Quest games. One of those games being, of course, mixed up Mother Goose. That's not a Quest game, but it was built in the same engine that they used for some of the Quest games. So I counted as a cousin of the Quest games. But yeah, that's just my own experience. To get into the history of King's Quest, though, and to repeat some of the history that we talked about already back when we had Damien on, but also when we talked about Phantasmagoria, Sierra Online was founded by husband and wife team Ken and Roberta Williams in 1979 in Oakhurst, California. Roberta had a love for text adventure games, specifically Colossal Cave Adventures. So she started coming up with ideas on a game that she wanted to make and worked with Ken to develop a game inspired by Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. For the project, Roberta would draw pictures using an Apple II and a graphics tablet that allowed her to hand trace art that she drew on paper. Ken then wrote a program to help other programs read the images that were drawn in an application called VersaWrite, which Roberta used for the tablet. The game they eventually developed would be Mystery House. Released in 1980 as a mail order game, they would publish the game under the same name as a consulting company that Ken ran online systems. Mystery House was a moderate success. It sold over 10,000 copies. Each copy had to be hand-packed into Ziploc bags by Roberta. She also provided telephone assistance to anyone who had questions. So if you had questions about how to play Mystery House, or you struggled with any of the puzzles, you could call a telephone number, and Roberta Williams, one of the founders of Sierra Online, would tell you how to solve the puzzle.
That's
she
good
was the support.
service.
It was good customer service.
The same year that they released Mystery House, they published Wizard and the Princess, also for the Apple II, but this time in color. This game sold well, selling around 60,000 copies, which allowed them to begin hiring staff. Soon, Online Systems became Sierra Online. Within a few years, the company had grown from just Roberta and Ken to around 100 employees with over $10 million in revenue. Wizard and the Princess was a crucial game to the story, as not only was it a fairly successful game, selling over 60,000 copies in total, it is also to be considered to be the first game in what would become the King's Quest series. So I guess I have to go back and play Wizards and the Princess if I really want to play all the King's Quest in order.
Yes, you do. I think they take place in the same world. I think that's the only connection.
In 1982, Sierra Online was approached to develop a graphical adventure game in order to highlight the graphical features of the upcoming IBM PC Junior. They also wanted a game that was animated, and that looked like something that would be impossible to have on the Apple II. Roberta already was interested in the idea of making a more graphically intensive game, so Sierra would agree to the proposal from IBM. IBM would go and provide a budget of $700,000, which is in 2026 dollars, $2.4 million, making it the most expensive title that Sierra had ever worked on at the time. Due to the secrecy behind the IBM PC Junior, the company didn't actually tell Sierra what system the game was targeting. In fact, the team at Sierra didn't even get to see a PC Junior until after the game was already released. All the development was handled on modified IBM PCs. So they're like, we got some good IBM PCs over here, and they were secretly IBM PC Juniors.
They are at least compatible with what became the PC Junior, which was saying something. The PC Junior, I think, famously is incompatible with most IBM PC stuff.
I feel like they just took a PC Junior and put it in a case of an IBM PC.
IBM might have done that, to be honest.
And just gave them to the Sierra team and was like, here, use these modified IBM PCs, and like stripped out any of the Junior references and just like, here you go. And they were like, oh, wow, these are pretty good.
Roberta came up with the idea for the story as she wanted to focus on a heroic character who has to save a kingdom. She wanted the game to feature non-violent elements, cute characters, humor that was family-friendly, and a fairy tale vibe. Because the IBM PCs were much more powerful than previous Apple II computers, they were able to make the game third person, which previous Sierra games were not in third person. They use that first person view that's kind of like looking at a PowerPoint presentation where it's static images with descriptions. For its development, the game used a few tricks in order to look as good as it did. And I will say King's Quest 1, while dated, does look pretty good. For one, King's Quest utilizes a space saving technique to render out its backgrounds. Instead of having pre-rendered images, which could take up space, the game uses a set of drawing instructions to render each background as the main character enters a location. Sierra also developed a proprietary engine that they called the Game Adaptation Language, but soon changed the name to the Adventure Game Interpreter, or AGI. For the release, IBM allowed Sierra to port the game to other computers. While they wanted the game to obviously be a main feature for the IBM PC Junior, they were hoping it was going to be the PC Junior's killer app. They were also being hounded by the US government for accusations of being a monopoly, and wanted to prove to the feds that they were playing fairly. So they said to Sierra, we don't want to get accused of being a monopoly. You can port this game to as many computers as you want.
They said, we wouldn't like you to do this, but legally we should do it.
Yes. And Sierra said, great. And they would put the game not only on the IBM PC Junior in 1984, but they would also port the game to the Tandy 1000, the Apple IIe, the Atari ST, the Amiga, the Macintosh, the Apple II GS, and even the Sega Master System. And this was incredibly helpful for Sierra because the PC Junior was discontinued after a year on the market, which I think is hilarious.
I also just really like this time and place for the way that PC manufacturers and they had to deal with like video game developers, and I just really loved how like everyone was kind of a little bit scrappy, and that like IBM is like, we need to have a video game on here, but we're not gonna make it. It's just like, we'll spend $1 million on hiring somebody to make it, but we wouldn't spend that $1 million on us making that game.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah.
I just think it's fun. Like, there's a world where they're like, we make IBM computers, and there's a lot of very much like staying in their lane type deal.
In the game, you play as the friendly knight, Sir Graham, who is tasked with discovering 3 legendary treasures. If he finds the 3 treasures, he can ascend to the throne and become the new king, as the current king, Edward, has no heirs. So Edward says, I'm dying. I need someone to take the throne. I task anyone to find these treasures. And Sir Graham says, I will do this. And he does. And then Sir Graham becomes King Graham. And that's King's Quest. It's a fairly straightforward, pretty simple plot for a game that I think is very fondly remembered.
You can also soft lock yourself out of.
Like, the first thing you can do is you can fall off a bridge by accident.
That's a theme throughout a lot of adventure games.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like Dragon Sphere, where you just jump down the well.
Yeah, the first thing you do, jump down the well, die. King's Quest was a massive success on release. It sold upward to 100,000 copies by 1986, and combined sales for the first 3 games in the series would reach upward to 500,000 copies by 1987. It also was positively reviewed, being called a revolutionary breakthrough by the publication Computer Games and a giant leap forward by Family Computing.
The sequels, King's Quest II, Romancing the Throne, and King's Quest III, To Err is Human, would retain the use of the AGI for their engine. When it came time to develop King's Quest IV, The Perils of Rosella, Sierra took a unique approach. They developed the game using 2 different engines, both the AGI and a new engine called Sierra Creative Interpreter, or SCI. This was done to not only support players who had older systems, but to also give players with newer systems some interesting updates. These updates included higher quality animations, higher resolution graphics, and support for sound cards such as the AbLib or Roland cards. In fact, Sierra ran promotional sales to encourage fans to buy these cards for their systems in order to experience the game as intended.
I think Sierra unofficially became a reseller for Roland and AbLib cards as well.
Which I'm sure AbLib and Roland both appreciated.
Yes.
Reportedly, there were some early concerns during the development of King's Quest IV as it features a female protagonist. Some staff members were worried that male players wouldn't play a game with a woman protagonist. However, Roberta didn't think this was true, and to her point, the game would sell around 100,000 copies in its first 2 weeks. One source reported that the game had nearly sold upwards to 800,000 copies in a year. A survey done also found that 35 to 45% of the players were women. So perhaps the players of King's Quest would play it with a female protagonist because they were female themselves. The game received commendable ratings from publishers at the time, such as a 91% from Computer and Video Games, an 85% from Commodore User. King's Quest IV would also go on to win Best Adventure or Fantasy Role-Playing Program at the Software Publishers Association in 1989, which sounds like a realtor award.
I mean, yeah, a lot of those trade show awards do sound very boring. Graphics would only get better in the following King's Quest game, King's Quest V, Absence Makes the Heart Go Yonder, released in 1990. The game would introduce VGA graphics into the mix, allowing for far more complex visuals. The release of the game did include an EGA release, which used 16 colors, but the VGA version would have been the version to get, as that boosted the graphics to 256 colors. That's so many colors!
There's a lot of colors.
That's a ton of colors.
The colors, Duke! The colors!
The game would be re-released on CD-ROM the following year with added voice acting. There was also an NES version created by Novo Trade and published by Konami in 1992, and an Atari ST version was announced, though canceled due to Sierra discontinuing support for that system. For the game's development, Sierra would utilize rotoscoping on live actors and keyframe the character sprites. This allowed for animation to be far smoother than previous King's Quest titles. King's Quest V sold upward to 250,000 copies by February of 1993, with sales quickly catching up to 500,000 copies. Per Sierra, the combined sales of the King's Quest series by March of 1996 would reach 3.8 million units. That's all 5 games in total, which is a lot of units for a company. Like previous games in the series, King's Quest V would score well with reviewers. Some criticism was tossed at the game for some of the voice acting on the CD-ROM version, which Computer Gaming World called wooden.
And how is your poor dear mother doing, William?
Oh, she hasn't been doing too well lately. But my brother and I help out whenever we can.
Dragon would give the game 4 out of 5 stars, All Game gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and a 2007 review from Adventure Gamers gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Now, when I saw that 2007 review on the list of reviews, I was like, wow, they reviewed that game that late? And I was thinking to myself, I was like, 1993 to 2007, that's not that big of a difference of time. It'll be a little different if Adventure Gamers reviewed it today.
Which, I mean, before Adventure Gamers was purchased by a casino,
right,
that was something they would have done in the past. They would have reviewed it today for a game that came out at that time, and I think that 3 out of 5 stars is a truly legitimate review because it was from Casino Adventure Gamers. Following up on King's Quest V would be King's Quest VI, Air Today, Gone Tomorrow, released in 1992. The game was designed by both Roberta Williams and Jane Jensen, who had only recently joined Sierra in 1991. And Jane Jensen is famous for the Gabriel Knight series. Most of the additional work on the game was done by Roberta, who would create a basic story and backdrop for the game, with Jane filling in the additional details. They wanted the game to be both tonally similar to past King's Quest games, but still stand out, because now we're looking at the 6th game in a franchise, and you kind of have to do something a little bit different to make it worth buying versus the other 5 games in the franchise. The game utilized utilized motion capture in its development, with real-life actors in real-life costumes being filmed for the animation. And I'm sure these costumes were over the top. The game would also be built out in a new version of the SCI, or Sierra Creative Interpreter. King's Quest VI would be released for DOS and Macintosh, though would have to be stored on 9 floppy disks. A CD version.
Stack of them.
It's when that's like we got. This is the day of cost versus analysis, where the company would be like, it's so cheap to make floppy disks, but so inconvenient for our consumer. What's the cost of making a CD-ROM versus just putting it on 9 floppy disks? Not most floppy disks for a game. We should figure out which.
I'll have to look that up, but I am looking it up, and they definitely cheaped out with these floppy disks because they all use very generic labels that just say King's Quest on it, and it's just typed in with like.
Oh, it's like a white. Isn't it like a label?
It's like a white label with. Yeah, typeset.
Yeah, typeset. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've seen those discs before. There was also a CD-ROM version that was released in 1993 for Microsoft Windows, which featured an updated soundtrack, voice acting, and higher resolution artwork, and also was released on 1 CD versus 9 floppies. Apparently, Sierra would send the soundtrack to various radio stations and include a pamphlet in the game instructing players to call stations and request the songs. This would not end necessarily positively for Sierra, as it would go on to have Sierra being threatened with legal action by some of these stations for harassment. Ken Williams responded to this threat by stating the stations were criminals for ignoring their customers. In the first week, the game sold around 400,000 units. Players loved it, with Dragon giving the game 5 out of 5, CU Amiga giving it an 89%, and Adventure Gamers giving it a 4.5 out of 5. And this is one of the games, because Jane Jensen worked on it, this is one of the games that proved Jane Jensen's, her power of writing to Roberta and Ken Williams. So then she was given increasingly more and more freedom to do whatever she wanted, and would go on to lead to the creation of the Gabriel Knight series.
Now, King's Quest VII, The Princeless Bride, would follow in 1994. Also, I just want to give props to Sierra for these incredibly great naming conventions that they've come up with. Absence Makes the Heart Go Yonder, Air Today, Gone Tomorrow, The Princeless Bride, all very good. King's Quest VII is also a unique game in itself. Again, it saw a redesign in the aesthetic, with this time being an animation style akin to Don Bluth or early Disney. Also, a first for the franchise, the game features 2 protagonists, Princess Rosella and Queen Valenice. Also different was the style of gameplay, with action and story separated into different chapters set in different regions of the world. You alternate between the princess and the queen with each chapter, and with both the characters eventually meeting up towards the end of the game. Another change would be the UI, in that the game introduced a smart pointer. Instead of referring to a series of action buttons, the pointer will highlight when it's passed over an interactive object and give you some items to choose from and what you can do with that object. On a technical level, the game also used more advanced SVGA graphics and was built in the updated SCI2 engine. It also would be the first King's Quest title to only be released on CD-ROM, and almost had to be put onto 2 CD-ROMs due to its size, but they were able to fit the game onto 1 disc by scaling it back from its original plans. King's Quest VII, like previous King's Quest games, sold fairly well, with 400,000 units selling by November of 2000. Reviews, however, were a bit more mixed. Adventure Gamers gave it 3 out of 5, Power Player gave it 85%, and Next Generation gave it 4 out of 5. The criticism was mainly lobbed toward the aesthetic of the game. Some people did not like the animation style aesthetic, some people kind of missed the old style. Other reviewers did praise the change, they thought it was innovative, so it was really just a preference on part of the reviewers.
So I did some research while Zach was going through his spiel here. And before we move on to the last of the King's Quest games, I did research the game that was stored on the most floppy disks.
Oh, good.
The game that is the official floppy disk release that is generally considered is Return to Zork by Activision, which was shipped on 21 high-density 3.5-inch floppies.
21. What?
There was also Strike Commander, where if you included everything, all the additions, like extra packs on Strike Commander, you got to 20 discs, 20 floppies. Monkey Island 2 was up to 11 discs, depending on the format. However, in 2025, there was someone named Jock Jade who wanted to play Factorio on floppy disks. He wrote a custom file system within Rust to be able to play the base game natively across 1,000 floppy disks. There's a video of them getting the crate of like the box of floppy disks and just having like a folding table set next to them as they loaded section by section of Factorio.
Apparently a good chunk of the floppy disks they used were just repurposed AOL free trials that they had to wipe.
The answer is Return to Zork, then Strike Commander. Those are your two officially released massive amounts of floppy disks. Last of the original King's Quest games would be the 1998 game King's Quest Mask of Eternity. Like previous King's Quest games, it would feature some new technology, specifically a full 3D engine. The gameplay style also changed, with it being a mix of action-adventure with point-and-click gameplay. It's also the first of the series to feature a character not related to the original character from the first game, which we haven't mentioned yet, but basically every other character in every other game were all connected to the first game through the original Kingram. This game, the King's Quest Masks of Eternity, which also didn't have a number either, it was just King's Quest Masks of Eternity, would feature a knight named Connor of Daventry, who is a knight tasked with saving King Graham after he and other mortals in the world are turned to stone. Development on the game was also fairly stressful. Roberta had a lot of different ideas, and during the initial development stages, her ideas changed. At the same time, Davidson and Associates, who were associated with Sierra through their parent company being the same parent, assigned a team of managers to work above Roberta Williams to create their own version of King Quest VIII, due to concerns about the content of her plans for the game, which were considered violent and overly religious. While Roberta worked on her own version of the game, they were working on their version. Eventually, however, Roberta was able to take back full control, but this would cause delays and due to loss of funding and time. The game would eventually be released in 1998. Sales data for the game is very inconsistent. Roberta Williams claims it was the best-selling game of 1998 and outsold Grim Fandango, which is a great adventure game, which I think we did an episode on or need to do an episode on.
We did an episode.
The publication GameSpot claimed that only around 70,000 units were sold by 2001 in the US alone. Westwood Studios would claim that by 2002, 750,000 units had sold, so it's not entirely clear how well it did. However, reviews are a bit easier to track down. All Game gave it a 2.5 out of 5. Computer Gaming World gave it a 4 out of 5, and IGN gave it a 7.8 out of 10, which sounds like a good review for IGN, so the game's probably good. Bad.
yeah. It's mixed, yeah.
It's IGN, it's always the opposite of whatever IGN thinks. So if IGN thinks the game is good, then the game is bad. If IGN thinks the game is bad, then the game is good. Reviewers didn't feel the switch to 3D was entirely groundbreaking, and it was negatively compared to Elder Scrolls Redguard, which was out at the time. However, its legacy is notable, as Mask of Eternity would go on to inspire a 12-minute musical suite that serves as the sequel to the game, composed by Donald W. Wilson, a professor at Bowling Green State University.
Which I think is one of the few times I've ever heard of a video game getting a sequel that was entirely music. It would take a bit of time before the release of the last and most recent King's Quest game, which would just be called King's Quest, and would not be created by Sierra, but rather the Odd Gentleman. The 2015 King's Quest is not a reboot, nor is it a remake, but rather it's a reimagining that considers the other game's canon. Uniquely, this game is episodic, with around 6 episodes, 5 numbered, and 1 epilogue. I don't think the epilogue really counts as an episode, but...
Oh, yeah, because this was during the times of the...
Everything had to be episodic?
Mid-aughts, where, yeah... During the mid-aughts of the 2015s, everything was episodic. This was the heyday of Telltale, and just everybody was releasing games slowly as episodic. Then they realized they could just charge us and not do anything.
I swore this game was a Telltale game until I realized I was looking into it and I was like, oh, it's not Telltale. But when I looked it up for the first time, I was like, oh, King's Quest, the Telltale adventure.
The Telltale game. No, they were just... Telltales were just the They were just the episodic kings and queens.
Yeah,
as it
they're
were.
Also, besides being episodic, it's not a point and click adventure game. It's a more of an action adventure style of game. The reviews were mostly positive. Metacritic holds the first game, episode 1, at 82 out of 100, the second at 67 out of 100, the third at 78 out of 100, the fourth at 67 out of 100, and the last at 78 out of 100. So I'd say that game got a C+ if I were to give it a rating overall.
I think it's King's Quest kind of gives me a little bit of a feeling of Broken Sword, because Broken Sword always did well in the 2D, and then when they switched to 3D, people didn't like it. And then when they went back to 2D, people liked it again. So if they released a King's Quest back in 2D versus the 3D games, I'm sure that would be a banger.
And that will pretty much do it for King's Quest. I mean, King's Quest has a long and storied history, as we've covered. All the games have their fans, their detractors, but I think it's safe to say that it is one of the defining adventure games of Sierra, and also one of the defining games of the genre adventure games. I think a lot of adventure games that followed owed a lot to King's Quest, and I think that is largely thanks to Roberta Williams really wanting to make games that she would play, and I think that helped a lot, because I think for the most part, when you have people trying to make games just because they want to make money, you're going to get games that are a little bit bad. But when you have people that truly love game design and want to show people what they like in a game, you get games like King's Quest that are genuinely very good. Despite the fact that the older games are a little dated, they're still fun. And they can be fun, even if you can soft lock yourself out of the game. Well, let's get into our retro rewind. Seth had me play 1080 Snowboarding, developed by Nintendo in 1998. 1080 Snowboarding is a snowboarding game, as the name would imply. It's a pretty solid snowboarding game, and one that I'm also not very good at. I'm not very good at it in the sense that I kept getting injured. Like, my character kept taking on damage until he was very injured, and then I got frustrated, and I would reset the bout, and I would do a little better, but then I would, like, accidentally fall off a very large jump and get even more injured. I know Seth has some nostalgia for it, but a lot of my nostalgia is actually for the SSX games, which I used to play at a friend's house. Those were for the PS2, and I really love the SSX games. I thought those were great.
1080 was better, though.
1080 is pretty good. I'm not going to lie. I think 1080 was a solid game. I'm more nostalgic for SSX.
Playing some 1080 or Wave Runner. You play Wave Runner during the summer, and you play 1080 during the winter. You're good to go. I did really like the movement and controls. One thing I did noted was a bit of slowdown. I'm not entirely sure if that's just because I was playing it on a flash cart rather than its original cartridge, but also N64 games do sometimes just have slowdown, so it might have just been the N64. But I did play it on real hardware beyond using a flash cart. I think overall, 1080 Snowboarding holds up. Great game. Definitely worth checking out if you have an N64. Next week, Seth, I want you to play a game that is a favorite game of a dear friend of the podcast, Evil Jim. I want you to play Time Cop for the Super Nintendo. Excellent. Evil Jim, a fun fact, holds a world record in beating Time Cop. Zach had me play Balance of Power, which is a strategy game of geopolitics during the Cold War. Such an exciting game to be playing. Created by Chris Crawford and published by Mindscape, and was released in 1985 on the Macintosh, 1986 on the MS-DOS and the Amiga, 1987 for the Atari and Apple II. Zach had me play the MS-DOS version. In the game, you play as either the leader of the USA or the USSR. You can play as one or two players, and you can play on very difficulty levels. You have to keep up with, during the game, the happenings around the world and gain political capital, and trying not to cause a nuclear war, because it's during the Cold War. You do so by deciding to act or not act against actions that are happening throughout the world. So there may be actions going on in the USSR that they're doing. There may be things that are going on in other countries that the USSR may be involved in or will be involved in that may escalate, and you need to decide to lean in or not lean in or negotiate. You can negotiate through back channels and stuff like that. There's a lot. It's very complex from a game, and so the first time I played it, I did nothing as the U.S. president. I just skipped my turn. Every turn's a year, takes place over 8 years, and I just said, they were like, "What do you want to do this year?" And I said, "Nothing." And I'm going to say something, and that is, there was peace. At the end of 8 years, there was no global conflict. There was a couple of revolutions throughout the world, but not in the U.S. or the USSR, and there was no nuclear war. It was peace. The USSR did have more political capital at the end of the day, but you know what? It was about the friends that we made along the way, not necessarily about who's one-upping one-up who else. The next playthrough, I decided to go the opposite, and the first action that I felt was something that like the Soviets were up to no good. I proceeded to push on them, and it escalated quickly from me deciding to challenge them, to me deciding to go negatively, diplomatically on them, to me going to DEFCON 1, to me going to DEFCON 4, and me starting a nuclear war in the first year of my presidency. The game goes to a screen where it's a completely black screen with white text, and it just says, "You have ignited a nuclear war." And no, there is no animated display of a mushroom cloud with parts of bodies flying through the air. We do not reward failure. And that was Chris's message to everyone playing, that it's not fun to start a nuclear war. So if you have the chance to start a nuclear war, don't. Fun fact, in 2013, Chris Crawford published the source code for about 17 of his games, including Balance of Powers. It's on a website. It is, in fact, erasmataz.com, erasmatazz.com, and you go to the library section, and he just has his source codes for all of his games, because apparently at a 2011 game developer conference, someone said, "Could you release it?" And he said he would look into it, and then he forgot about it, and then 30 months later he remembered it and proceeded to put out his source code for general distribution. So if you wanted some of the source codes for his games, you can go and just download it, and it's still available to be downloaded. Overall, I think that the game could be fun to play with two people today, or be played through by like a post of type of gameplay because I believe people possibly still do, but it is a popular play-by-post type game where you send like what you do and people send back what they do, or like share game files. I think what you could do is you could make your actions change to the next player and send that email file to somebody else. They can load it on their screen. They can do their actions as the second player and then email to you, so you don't actually know what the USSR or USA person is doing. I think that'd be a lot of fun. It's definitely in the camp of being more of a board game than a video game, but it's a complex political game. So like if you enjoy those type of things, it could be a fun game to check out. If you need action or flashing lights to keep your attention span engaged, no, you're not going to get it here. It's a game that was released in 1987 about geopolitics during the Cold War. So it's as boring as you think it is. But some people find that type of era and type of stuff going on interesting. Next week, Zach, you could play Dangerous Dave for MS-DOS.
Great. I will. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening to today's episode. If you have any memories of King's Quest or the King's Quest games or any of the Quest games, let us know. You can do so by emailing us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're available wherever podcasts can be found via Podbean, iTunes, or iHeartRadio. We're available on social media. Look us up, Classic Gaming Brothers, CG Brothers Pod. Be sure to also follow us on YouTube, like and subscribe. Follow us on our Twitch, even though we never post there. And also support us on Patreon if you can. We do have a Patreon, as a reminder. The tiers start pretty low, and you can support us however you want.
They also go pretty high.
They do go pretty high. As we always say, or used to say, if you like our podcast, share it with at least.
Oh, I was
two
thinking
friends or
about
three
that.
friends?
No, I was thinking about that recently. It goes back to the thought of if somebody doesn't like something, they tell a lot of people, like 10 people. But if somebody likes something, they tell 3 friends. So that's the max you get. If somebody really likes something, they'll tell 3 friends. This is from science. We request that you tell 3 friends, because if you tell any more, that means you don't like us. But if you tell exactly 3 friends and no more, that means you like us. So go out and tell 3 friends. I was just thinking, it's funny that you brought that up, because I was just thinking about that recently.
Yeah, well, be sure to tell 3 friends how much you love the Classic Gaming Brothers. And with that, Seth, am I forgetting anything else?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.